Hello, everyone. I am very, very happy to be here. It's the fourth year of this Young Activist Summit. These are young adults or older children, depending how you look at them. This year they come from Afghanistan, South Africa, United Kingdom, United States, and Chile, and all of them speak about the same thing, solidarity and inclusion, two important topics in 2022. Two topics that are linked, because without solidarity, nothing is possible. What I am proposing today is that we should all offer a helping hand. So I'm just going to ask them to come on the stage. They're just right there at the end of the room. And I'll just ask for a round of applause for them, please. There is Pashtana Durrani. She's 24 years old. She comes from Afghanistan, and she protects Japanese. There's Zulaikha Patel. She's from South Africa, and she fights against racism. There's Sebastian Benfeld, 21 years old, and he fights against pollution and protects the environment. And then there's Zulaikha. She comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and she protects street children. And then there's Kili Katiwel, and she's 26 years old. She's from the UK, but she lives in LA, Los Angeles, and she fights for the rights of persons with disabilities. And then Samir Jail, he comes from the US, and he protects students from bullying. So you can see many faces on the screens behind me. These are young activists who are active all around the world. There are hundreds of them around the world that are mobilizing to promote human rights and to protect the environment. You can see their faces. Say hi to all of them. They remind us that we need to fight now. We need to fight against female genital mutilation or children. We need to protect biodiversity or any other cause. And perhaps you'll see some familiar faces. You can see their names on the screen. You can even see participants from previous editions, Burundi, Haiti, France, the Philippines, other countries. You have all of their names and the causes they fight for. This ceremony will be streamed in French, English, Arabic, and Spanish, and you can ask your questions. Everyone can participate and leave comments in the chat. React. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you think about these young activists. And please leave the flag of your country so we know where you're coming from. At the end of the presentation of all of the activists, you can ask your questions. So now let's get into it, of course. You're going to meet an extraordinary young woman. Everyone on the stage is extraordinary. She is courageous. She had to leave her country, Afghanistan, when the Taliban retook power.
Education was the only way out for many women back then, and it still is. We are the ones taking that initiative. nobody else should be coming to rescue us, because we are supposed to leave this country.
Bonjour Pashtana.
Hello, Pashtana.
Vous parlez quelques mots de français, mais on va parler
You speak a bit of French. I'm going to ask questions in French, and you're going to answer in English. You all have interpretation available. I would like to know the direct consequences. What happened concretely in your life a year ago in August 2021?
A year ago, I was just a student going to the American University of Afghanistan, living my life, going to cafes with my friends, and doing my activism, supporting rallies, holding rallies, anti-corruption rallies, working on schools. I had 18 schools in Kandahar, and that's all I did. But then one day, a few men take over my country, and I'm told that I'm not allowed to go to my office. I'm not allowed to go to my university. I'm not even allowed to get on the plane without a mahram or male chaperone. And I'm not allowed to leave the country. And that's not my reality, but the reality of every Afghan girl and Afghan women right now and a year ago in Afghanistan.
Pourquoi c'était indispensable de partir?
Why did you need to leave? Why was it impossible to stay?
I remember one of my friends, I was so headstrong. I was like, I'm not going to leave. This is my country. I own it as much as they own it. Why should I be the one leaving it? And one of my friends, they came in and they told me, they're like, yes, you're on the move. You're leaving every now and then. You're in different provinces because people believe in you and they're giving you homes. But do you think it's fair to them or to your family, the danger that you put them and yourself into and the communities? And most importantly, you'll be discovered, you'll be forced to say stuff on camera that you don't stand for. So do you really want that, or do you want to go somewhere where you can actually continue to work? And it's amazing that when I was leaving, I had only one school, and I really wanted to stick to it. That was all. I was done fighting, but the minute I came out, I understood and realized that there are communities who are reaching out to me who want the same thing. I come from Kandahar, I've never been to Bamyan. People saw my work and they were like, can you do the same thing for us? I was like, okay. And then from Bamyan to Takhar to Kabul and next week to Helmand, we're growing. So I think for me, that was the most important point.
Alors, le projet LEARN a été
The LEARN project was created before the Taliban arrived to power. Why was it essential before the Taliban came to power?
Even before the Taliban, our government was no good. They have been known for corruption. I come from rural tribal Afghanistan. My district and my village, Salisun Patel Tarize, they still don't have electricity. We don't have mobile networks after 6 p.m. And my own family was IDPs, internally displaced people, into another district, which is Spinboldak. And even then, my cousins didn't have the right to go to school because the government took the money and practically abused the communities and never opened a school for them. So for me, LEARN was that one place where people like us could have a school, a space to learn and educate their girls, especially safely and securely.
Alors, on le comprend bien maintenant. Hein,
we understand it now. The project has expanded. What do they learn in these underground schools? What do you want to teach them?
There's these two sorts of approaches that we do. Normally, it might not be relevant here, but it's very relevant in Afghanistan. We do normal schooling. We go for grade 7 to grade 12, which currently the Taliban have banned secondary and high school education. We also go for bio, physics, chemistry, mathematics, English, Pashto Dari, which is these are the subjects that are taught in a school, in a public school. But apart from that, we also go for STEM website development. We also go for graphic designing. We also go for things that could help them freelance. The reason being, we want them to be fiscally independent. I always joke about it. My own father, when he passed away, I was told that you should get married. Don't talk a lot. It's no good. In the end, that's what every woman should be doing anyways. And I was able to make that decision for my siblings and for my mother. I moved out. I did everything on my end because I was fiscally independent. And I want every girl to be able to make that choice. Even if it's limited, I'm very creative, so I come up with solutions. So we make sure that the girls are able to freelance once they graduate from our programs. And I think it not only contributes to the current situation where families are in poverty, they cannot afford groceries or meals, so the girls can contribute, but most importantly, I think it helps them be that decision maker in their own families.
Parce qu'il faut l'expliquer ça, c'est que en fait, si la jeune fille n'a pas
if the young girl doesn't have education or training, is she forced into marriage? Well, she may be. And for her family, she isn't worth anything. And then her education can be seen as important, maybe. It's completely different here. Can you explain it to us?
One thing we need to understand is that Afghanistan was not like this always. The most important thing being in the 1920s, we had the right to vote from before many countries, even in Europe. So one thing to highlight. Apart from that, we had an education minister back in the 1920s, Queen Soraya, who started these programs where they would send women to Turkey, to other countries to get themselves educated and become midwives or nurses. In the 1960s, we had a women healthcare minister. So things are not have always been like this. Currently, yes, there is a situation where girls are the ones who go to bed hungry, especially the oldest girl in the family, because she has to sacrifice her meal for her younger siblings. That's one part of it. Yes, there are people who are forced to sell their daughters into this marriage because they need the money either to feed themselves or the younger kids. So this has happened, and I don't want to shy away to acknowledge what is the reality of Afghanistan, but I also don't want to dismiss that our history was much different and we could have done much different things. So yes, it's different here, but in majority of Afghanistan, that's the reality of Afghan girls.
J'aimerais juste avoir ton regard parce qu'il y a des choses qui sont en train de se passer en Iran en ce moment.
I would just like to know your opinion about what's happening in Iran, the revolts that are happening. What do you think about that?
I think it's first not my place to comment about Iran, but as a sister in solidarity, as from the region that we come from, and the amazing thing that the Iranian women and the Iranian men, by the way, are doing is astonishing. I think we need to acknowledge that Gina was a Kurdish woman whose name is still not acknowledged on international media, and she was from minority, she was abused, and she lost her life because of that. So I think for me it's very important to acknowledge that, stand in solidarity with Iranian women, and at the same time acknowledge that it's amazing how they're fighting for their rights.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your opinion and your experiences. Just remember, you can prepare your questions remotely or in person, and then at the end we're going to have a question and answer session. So just prepare your questions, and then of course you can leave comments online. You can say what you think about what Pashtana said, about what's happening today in Afghanistan. We're going to speak about other topics. We talk a lot in Europe about the war in Ukraine, but we can't forget about other regions of the world. Now we're going to move to another young activist. Now he was only 13 years old when he decided to change the school rules. And she was forced to change her hair.
And the policies were exclusionary, and they were racist, and they were anti-black.
Bonjour Zulaikha.
Good morning, Zulaikha. Could you talk to us a bit about what triggered all of this? You were 13. I remember that that's not something that happens, organizing a protest at 13. So what happened, really?
What triggered me to start to organize this protest was that at the time what we were experiencing in the school was a very harsh form of overt racism, and it essentially became a war against our identity because we were being forced to assimilate to what we were not. We were being told that we could not wear our hair as it grows naturally. We could not speak in our own personal groups with our friends outside of class in our African languages. And that became a war on who we are. And it ultimately, essentially began to force us to erase our blackness. And when I realized that this started to become an erasure of my identity, it triggered me to do something because I knew I had to defend my identity, because I knew the history that was attached to systemic racism in South Africa. And I knew that I had to take a stand, not just for myself, but for my identity and for the identity of my ancestors who, before me, had to also forcefully erase their identity.
Est-ce que tu vivais le racisme au quotidien?
Did you live racism in your everyday life? Was that something that that was a part of your everyday life at school, for example?
From my childhood, my early childhood, growing up in an interracial and an interfaith background and family, growing up in a South Africa that is now a post-apartheid South Africa where the laws have changed constitutionally. Apartheid is no longer constitutionalized and is no longer in the legislation of South Africa. However, the one thing that has not changed is the policies that uphold institutions and the traditions that uphold institutions, and people have not changed. Because it's not enough that laws change merely. People must also change. And through my daily life from my childhood, I experienced racism in my interactions with people. I experienced racism through the different phases of school I went through. And I experienced racism in the policies of the schools that were built with the ideal that I would never someday be part of these schools as a black girl. The school that I went to, Pretoria High School for Girls, was a school that was built, when it was built in the year it was built for white girls only. And so the policies were constructed for white girls only. The policies did not have me and my identity in mind. And I experienced racism from being excluded and not being included in that environment. And that was what my daily life was like. And my experiences were not unique to me only. My experiences were identical to every black child in South Africa and every black person who still lives with the reality of experiencing systemic racism in South Africa.
Alors concrètement, qu'est-ce que tu as fait?
What did you do exactly to rebel? You organized protests. What else did you do?
When I was 13 years old in 2016, I decided that when I realized something had to be done, I began to speak with my peers around what we could do to change these policies. And then I co-founded a movement called Stop Racism at Pretoria High School for Girls, which advocated for the end to institutionalized racism in public schools in South Africa. And our strategy was to lead 3 silent protests to firstly demand for change, and also to take our petition, which we demanded a change in the school policy, for the policy to be anti-racist and inclusive of everyone who attended the institution, as well as the inclusion of African languages, and the change in the policy which stated we could not speak our own languages when we were in our personal circles outside of class. And we decided to then write our petition up, and on the 26th of August, we arrived at school dressed in all black and started our first peaceful protest, and we were met with an increased number of security on the property of the institution. And the following day, when we came back, we were harassed by the security as we were just preparing for our silent march, where we were going to hand our petition to the executive administration of the institution. And when we were met by this high-risk private security team, which at the time was armed, we were threatened with arrest. And we then decided that it could not end here. Our voices could not just be limited to the gates of this institution and to the borders of South Africa only. The world had to hear our cries. And we decided to take our cries to social media, where we use social media as a tool to further our activism. And we shared our experiences, shared videos of our protests, shared our petition, which gained over 34,000 signatures across the world, and that then led to the school's policy changing, as well as an inquiry into the institution, and it led to the Department of Education in the country probing investigations into policies across the country in public schools, as well as changing the National Development Plan for 2030, and including that by 2030, all public schools in South Africa should have anti-racist policies.
We can feel the power and the will to rise up. But you also wrote a children's book, if I'm not mistaken. And you considered it was essential to speak to children. And I know that the title of the book is My Coily Crowny Hair. Is that vital to you?
For me, it is vital that when we work around changing the world, we work with the youngest of the youngest people who form part of our world, because believe it or not, children form a very integral part of this world. And it's children who are going to occupy and inherit this future we want to build, which is an inclusive and progressive future. So we can't leave children out. And one of the most important ways to speak to children is through literature. And I felt that it was important that children see themselves represented in literature. And I felt that it was important for a black girl to be able to pick up a book and see herself in the pages of the book in a positive light, so that it makes her existence feel empowered, and so that when she sees herself in the book, she is now encouraged to reach her full capacity because she is now empowered.
On parlera tout à l'heure certainement
We'll talk about what you're doing right now later on. There's a book, there's what you did before, and now you're trying to change school curricula. That's going to come up in the questions later on. Thank you so much for talking to us about your struggle.
Like
Pashtana, you can write your reactions in the chat window, and you can prepare your questions as well here in the room. We'll have time to ask them later. There will be questions for everyone, so don't hesitate. Tell us how you feel, and tell us if you suffer racism in your countries as well. How have you reacted? What have you done? Do you feel afraid to do something because you fear the burden that might place on you? Now, let's move on to Sebastian. Sebastian lives in one of the most polluted regions in the world, just to the north of Santiago, on the Pacific coast. It is called a sacrificed region by the government because there's lots of pollution there. And so you started your struggle for the environment.
Hay más de 17 industrias contaminantes juntas que son gigantes, que tienen mucho poder. Uno se siente como David contra Goliat.
Could you explain to us what it's like for the people who live in your region to live with so much pollution? What are the consequences for your daily life? The consequences are terrible. However, before I tell you about it, I'd like to thank you for the chance to be here with these admirable activists. I really look up to all of you, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to so many of you, to talk about my struggle in climate change. Climate change is something that we see in Latin America, in my country, in Chile. Many Latin American countries are affected by drought, but also by the extractive industries. My region is the most polluted region in the entire country, and we face many problems. As the video showed, there's lots of pollution, and this has had a deleterious effect on the health of children. There's sulfur and arsenic in their lungs, and they're having cancer at an earlier and earlier age. And this goes against the human rights of the people who live in the region. Their rights are being violated. So what we've been trying to do is to empower people and give them the tools so that they can defend themselves and defend their rights. Yes, you were able to achieve an agreement. But are those empty words, or will that accord have real consequences on the ground? I think the Escazú Agreement has a bit of both. It is a declaration of best intentions that calls on us to ensure environmental justice and more environmental transparency. However, as long as it isn't ratified, it'll just be nothing more than words. But now what we're trying to do is to translate those words into specific and concrete actions, so that we can change the lives of people on the ground. What else do you have to do to translate these words into actions? What else do you have to do on the ground so that these accords can be properly implemented? Well, we work with over 30,000 people in 400 regions to ensure that Chile ratifies the Escazú Agreement. As more and more people sign on, and as more countries in the region sign on, we'll ensure that our continent is greener and more environmentally friendly. Basically, we've been working to create new laws and new institutions that will protect the environment and the communities. And for me, it's very important that environmental defenders are protected because they fear for their lives every day. Have you been threatened as an environmental defender? Fortunately, not yet. It would be terrible if someone threatened a person who's defending the environment. But I do know of many people that I work with whose lives are in danger. For example, a friend of mine who works for the organization was threatened just because she spoke about the human right to access to water. It's not true that everyone can access water, and some people have a very limited amount of water that they can use every day, so they have to decide what to use it for different purposes. And other people have had to decide whether to use water for one thing or for one another. And so who threatened your colleague? Well, that's the question, isn't it? Who is behind these threats? We don't have an answer yet, unfortunately, because we don't have the necessary mechanisms to investigate these threats, nor do we have the necessary tools to punish them, which is why we're trying to put together an institution that will try to deal with these issues. The lives of environmental defenders are in danger. And in fact, my region is the most dangerous region for environmental defenders, and over 200 people are murdered every year because of their cause. You managed to do something extraordinary. You were able to close a foundry. How did that happen? How did a small group of people, how did a young person manage this? Teamwork, really. One person can't accomplish very much by themselves. We need colleagues and comrades who will fight alongside us to achieve an objective. In Punchunkavi, we work with a women's organization that works every single day, and they fight against pollution in the Punchunkavi region. So we're really a secondary actor that pushes them and empowers them so that they can achieve their goals. And together we were able to close that copper foundry that polluted the environment in Quintero, because there are more than 16 companies that are operating in the region, oil companies and so on, and they're polluting the environment. So we have to continue our fight to make our region into how it was before, to make it more green. So there is the health of the people who live in the region, but there's also the matter of protecting marine life in the Pacific Ocean. What are the direct consequences for marine fauna? They're very serious, unfortunately. Chile is a long country, and so we have a very long coastline, and yet our coastline isn't protected. And there are important areas such as the Humboldt Nature Reserve, which is located in the La Serena region of the country. And this place is a hotspot for biodiversity. At a global level, it's a beautiful place. There are penguins, there are lots of living beings, but for a while now a mining company has been trying to enter into the region and to settle in the jungle in the region. So we need to protect that region and avoid that from happening. The Escazú Agreement is a great tool in this sense because it will stop these types of projects from invading natural reserves. There is a movement worldwide that is trying to protect the climate with people like Greta Thunberg. Is that something that helps you? Is that something that inspires you? Of course. And I love seeing so many young people here today. It convinces me that there is the motivation to work because it's our future that's in jeopardy right now. And we need everyone to work together. Thank you so much. Again, I'll repeat this as I do with everyone else. First of all, a round of applause. And then, please prepare your questions here in the room, online, prepare your comments. How do you fight for the environment where you are? Have you accomplished something in that sense? Do the big industries where you are present any obstacles to you? Don't hesitate to ask your questions. We will collect all of them and we will communicate them here on the stage. Thank you.
Now, on the other side of me, we have C'est prévu, Amy Luzila. C'est prévu. We talk about it directly. It's a very interesting first name. And she's called that because she was born prematurely. And her mum said, no, no, c'est prévu. It was anticipated. That was how it was supposed to be. So c'est prévu. Today, you're talking about protecting children. This is your fight. When she was 17 years old, she opened an orphanage in Kinshasa to take care of street kids. And because you were shocked by this situation. And you wanted to protect these children.
Abande ko sing avana le ando sing avie zakita pass na avana le fo ande ko sing andula na pass malif place agula les alaiti.
c'est prévu.
21 ans.
You're 21.
22 ans.
22.
Et tu as
22 years
13
old.
enfants.
And you have 13
Comment tu fais? Tu
children.
m'expliques.
Can you explain that?
Je m'en occupe, simplement.
Oui, mais ça demande une énergie folle.
I imagine that you need a lot of energy to manage all of them.
Ça demande une passion énorme aussi.
Yes, and a lot of
Comment
patience
ça
as
s'est
well.
fait? Comment ça a commencé cette histoire de se dire,
And
bon, bah,
can
à
you
17
talk
ans,
us
je vais
a
ouvrir un
little bit,
orphelinat.
take us a little bit through the story and the history of the
Je n'ai pas
orphanage?
voulu tout de suite avoir un orphelinat.
Yes,
Tout
I
de
mean,
suite,
it wasn't
je voulais
originally the
m'occuper
plan
des
to
enfants qu'on
open
abandonne.
an orphanage.
Parce que,
I
après,
wanted
dans
to
la
take
rue,
care
ils
of children
n'ont
who were
pas-
abandoned
ils n'ont pas la
because on the
nourriture, ils
streets
dorment
they
par
don't have
terre,
food,
ils mettent
they
des
sleep on
cartons
the
pour
ground,
dormir dans des marchés.
they sleep under
Moi, je voulais
blankets
juste m'en occuper.
just on the
Mais
street.
comment?
And I just wanted to
J'ai
take care
commencé
of
par
them.
faire des repas dans les
And I
rues.
started by
Mais je me disais que,
distributing
ben,
meals
aujourd'hui,
on the
j'offre un
streets.
repas, ils mangent
And then I
demain.
thought that
Mais après,
if I give them a meal today, but then the next day they won't really have anything, it's not solving the problem long term. So I decided to open the Maison des Anges, the home of the angels. It is a shelter and orphanage to take care of children as they deserve. And yes, it's extremely difficult to live on the streets in Kinshasa. It's not like living on the street in Geneva. What's it like for children in Kinshasa?
Qui fait qu'il y ait des enfants dans les rues à Kinshasa. Il y a les
There
phénomènes
are lots
d'enfants
of
sorciers,
things
c'est-à-dire
that are
quand un
problematic on
parent
the streets
décède
in
ou un
Kinshasa.
enfant perd ses deux
If a parent dies
on
or if
l'accuse
a
de
child
sorcellerie. On dit que
loses their
l'enfant a tué
parents,
ses
the child is
parents
accused
ou
of
son
witchery.
parent par des
They're
pouvoirs
accused of
maléfiques.
being the
Du coup, la
devil and
famille,
having evil powers.
l'abandonne dans les rues.
And this means
Il y en a
that they
qui
are
arrivent dans les
abandoned
rues
on the
parce que les
streets.
parents sont
Some
tellement
of them
pauvres
end up on the
qu'ils
streets
préfèrent
because their
vivre
parents
dans la
are
rue parce
so
qu'ils paient demander de
poor
l'argent
that
facilement
it's easier
et
for them to live on
s'évoluer.
the streets
Il y en
because
a
they
qui
can
arrivent dans
beg
les rues parce
and
qu'il y
get
a des
money.
agressions.
Or,
Comme à
and
l'est du
sometimes
pays, il y
they're
a
from
des
an
agressions
abusive
comme ça,
family.
les
On
massacres
the
et
east
tous
of
les
the
parents
country,
décèdent
for
ou
example,
l'enfant est abandonné.
if
Il y
parents
a
had
beaucoup de
died,
causes qui
if the
favorisent
parents have
les
died,
phénomènes
then
d'enfants de rue.
children are left on the
Maintenant, si on
streets.
dit qu'on se téléporte dans ta maison des anges, que le quotidien, c'est quoi?
And so they're
Comment ça se
taken
passe,
to
là,
the
le
Maison
quotidien
des
pour les
Anges.
enfants?
What's the daily life like for them
C'est
there?
comme à la maison. Le but, c'était vraiment de donner une vraie famille.
Well, the objective
Donc,
is
on
to
se
create a
réveille,
sort of
on va aller,
family.
on se
We
bouge, on
wake
va à
up,
l'école.
we move, we all
On
go to
sort de
school
l'école,
together.
on mange, on se repose,
Then
on fait
after
les
school,
devoirs.
we do homework,
Après,
we
on
eat
mange
together,
encore
we
le
take a
soir,
rest.
on
In the
se
evening,
parle.
there's also
Quand
a
je suis là,
meal.
j'ai fait la
And
nourriture, j'ai
when I
un
work with
moment
them,
pour parler à chacun.
we
Comme ils
chat
viennent de
together,
la
we
rue,
eat together.
ils ont
Because
tellement
they're
de
from the
blessures, ils ont
street,
tellement de
they have a
choses
lot of
après, il
deep
faut parler
scars, and there's
tous
a
les
lot
jours,
of
savoir
things
si
to
tout va
talk
bien,
through with
s'il y
them.
a
There's a lot of things
les
to follow
moments
up on to
bien
make
de
sure that
vous,
they're
comment ça se
being
passe à
well
l'école.
taken
Après,
care
moi,
of, and
j'ai tapé
I like to
quelqu'un à
follow
l'école.
up on them, make sure
C'est
things are
vraiment la
going
vie
well
de
at
famille
school.
que je voulais
I try to
donner.
create a sort of
Combien de
family
personnes qui
life.
travaillent avec toi? Tout le monde est bénévole?
So is
Tout le monde est
everyone
bénévole,
who
je
works
suis
with you
entourée
a
d'actuellement des
volunteer?
80 jeunes.
Yes,
Plus des
at the
80
moment there
d'ailleurs.
are more
Et
than
chacun
80
donne une
young people who
contribution
work with me, and each
par
of them
mois de
have
$2
make a
$4 000
$2
qui est $2.
contribution
On arrive à
each
mettre la
month.
provision avec.
So this means
Après,
that
il y a
we
les frais
can get the
propres,
supplies that we
pour lesquels
need,
payer les loyers,
and there
payer
are
les
also
personnels qui
different
travaillent, payer la
funds
santé, tout ça.
to pay
on
for
va
the
faire un
rent
petit
and things
calcul.
like that.
On est
So
combien dans cette salle
let's
aujourd'hui?
calculate
On est à
how
peu
many
près
of us
800.
are there here. There are about 100 people in the room
Si
today.
chacun d'entre nous
If everyone
donne
here
5 francs suisses,
gives 5
4 000
Swiss
c'est quoi, 4 000
francs,
Si chacun
about
donne 4 000 francs, c'est déjà
4,000
la
francs.
moitié.
pas 4 000 francs. Ça,
Not
pas tout le monde.
4,000
Tous
francs,
4 000
sorry,
francs.
sorry, hang on.
Non, si tout le monde donne
If
5 francs et ça
everyone
fait 4 000
gives
francs, tu fais quoi
5
avec 4 000
francs
francs?
and you have 4,000 francs, what would you do with that money?
Congolais, c'est la nourriture pour toute la journée pour un enfant. Je vais dire les pains, les laits, les
4,000
soirs, la viande, tout ça.
Congolese francs would be the food for one child for an entire day,
Non, mais 4 000
for
francs
one
suisses.
day.
4 000 francs congolais.
But
Ah ouais, mais
that's
nous, on a
in
4 000 francs
Congolese
suisses.
francs.
C'est combien?
Yes,
c'est
but
4
I
000
was
euros.
talking about 4,000
c'est
Swiss
énorme.
francs, about 4,000
4 000
euros.
euros,
4,000
Je paye les
euros.
loyers, je paye
That's so much.
l'école.
I'd pay
Mais pour combien
rent,
de
I'd
temps?
pay for education,
pour plus de
and for how
3
long?
mois.
For more than
Plus.
3
Vous vous
months,
rendez compte?
even more.
En fait, il suffit de pas grand-chose.
Do you notice?
Ouais, il
Really,
suffit- non,
what's
il faut
important
pas-
is
on n'aide
small
pas les gens parce
contributions.
qu'on a beaucoup de moyens, c'est faux. Sinon, toutes les maisons inhabitées dans les mondes, c'est
All
réhabité
of
par des
the
enfants qui sont dans
empty
les rues.
houses
Et
in the
les
streets,
gens
if they were
ne
filled with
jetteraient
street
pas la
kids, it would be a
nourriture.
game
Donc,
changer.
on aide
But in
les
many
gens,
cases, these street
on veut
kids
sauver
don't
le monde
have
d'abord parce
food.
qu'on a beaucoup
We
trop
want to
d'amour.
play
Commence
a
par là.
small part, and the starting point has to be love.
Yeah.
En fait, c'est pas toi qui l'as fait.
You have a
encore.
baby,
Mais t'as un
not
bébé.
your
Comment tu
baby,
fais pour
but
t'en
you have a
occuper?
baby.
Raconte-nous comment il est
Can you
arrivé là, ce
tell
bébé.
us the story of that
Le
small baby. The baby was the son of a street child. Their mother was 23 years old and became pregnant. She lived on the street. And she said, I can't take care of the child. I live on the street. She said, I can't take care of this child. So the baby fell into our care. And he's now 4.5 months old. and things are going really well. You are also a student of law, as well as running the orphanage. There are some students here in the room. When we're students, of course, it's already difficult to take care of ourselves, and you take care of a baby, as well as 12 other children, and you're a student. How do you juggle everything? Well, it's important to find a balance. When I'm at university, I compartmentalize. But when I'm at the Maison des Anges, I also am fully there. I'm able to find that balance, or else it's just far too complicated. Because I cannot let my studies go, because I need to take care of the children, of course, but at the same time there are children who are really counting on me. What's most important for you when it comes to taking care of the children? Well, I think we need to understand the root causes of this phenomenon. We need to understand in order to protect these children. If I can understand the legislative aspect of things, and I can understand the justice and legal aspect, that's very important too. Would you like to open other Maison des Anges in Kinshasa and other parts of Africa? Yes, of course. I think that there are 24 regions in DRC. And I think it's important that all of the provinces in the region have orphanages like this. And are there other movements that are opening similar orphanages? Well, it's not easy, because I think charity is something inherent. You have it or you don't. And so we try to talk to people and explain that it's the future of these children that's at stake. The future of our planet also depends on these children. If they're not appropriately educated, if they're street kids and they don't go to school, it's a complete imbalance, because there are children then who are educated and the children who aren't. And the world doesn't need this. I mean, if you're interested, if anyone's interested in donating 5 francs, we're going to actually include a link for direct donations on our website. 5 francs. I mean, that's about the cost of a coffee here. I'm sure that you can contribute that much. Now, please applaud. Congratulations. Thank you so much, c'est prévu.
Alors, si vous êtes en ligne, vous pouvez réagir.
If you're online, please do contribute in the chat. The link for donations will also be included in the chat online. Get your questions ready for her, online and on site. Next up, we are going to talk to Keely Catwells. You're 26 years old. I said that you were old because you're the oldest here on the stage, but of course you're not old. You were born in the UK. Today you live in Los Angeles. And at 17 you opened an agency for actors, and with a particular twist. The goal was to promote the inclusion of people with disabilities and change perspectives.
I actually lost a job due to ableism, and that's really the first time that I identified as a disabled person. After your dream, and don't be fooled or stopped by the barriers that stand in your way. We will get past them and keep creating, because the world needs to hear your voice.
Bonjour Keely.
Hello, Keely. Now, we saw in the video that you have a condition and you have an invisible disability. But is it a disadvantage that people might think that you're pretending?
Thank you. And before I begin, I would actually love to start with a brief visual description of myself for anyone who may be low vision or blind or anyone who only has access to the audio content. So I am a white woman in my 20s. I have blonde hair and I'm wearing a blue suit, the blue suit that goes with me to every fancy event. And behind me is a wonderful poster that says Young Activist Summit and Together We Thrive. And yes, to your question, absolutely. And because I didn't see my experiences reflected in the media, I never actually thought that I was a disabled person until I experienced a society that was not accessible to me. And I experienced the barriers of attitudes, the physical barriers and the communication barriers. And that was really the light bulb moment for me. But I remember also getting on a bus, needing a seat, and people saying, oh, but you don't look disabled. And for the same reason, when I use the disabled bathroom, people are often accusing me of taking advantage of the system. And that's also why I started See Talent, because I think oftentimes in media, we often see disabled people reflected as one of three stereotypes. We either have the villains, because apparently disabled people are so mad at the world because we are disabled, or we have the victim stereotype because we are to be pitied, and then we have the inspirational stereotype that we have to be inspiring and we're here for non-disabled people to make them feel better about themselves. So I really also saw how these stereotypes were playing out in society and how much of an amazing power we have with the media industries, the film industries, to make change. Because I truly believe that the media, film, TV, it changes the votes we make, the policies we pass. And I think even if we look at the state of the US, for instance, sub-minimum wage in 37 states is still legalized. And that has a huge knock-on effect to the way that disabled people are seen and treated.
Today, you've worked with Disney, Google. How did you achieve that? How did you gain access to these big companies?
It's been a journey, and it's definitely not possible without a lot of support. But disabled talent are incredibly talented, and I truly believe if we all have the right access to education, to tools, to agents and managers that understand disabled talent and know how to pitch them, then we can start to make change and get into these big companies. And I think a lot of the time it's an education process. A lot of people just simply don't know, because disabled people have been so invisible, unfortunately, within society because of the historical charity model of disability, medical model of disability, and people are even afraid to say the word disabled. And I actually think that that's an important point and plays into a lot of the work that we do. So you may have noticed I choose to identify as a disabled person, so identity first language. And I choose that because I want to say that it's not because of my medical conditions that I am disabled. I am disabled by the inaccessible society that we live in. And I believe that if we take the onus off the individual and say it's not us that's broken, it is the system, then companies and people begin to understand and are able to take the action that is needed to make that change. But See Talent, I believe, has really been successful because of the talent that we represent. We represent disabled writers, disabled actors, content creators, and more. And these talent have been able to really claim and control the narratives like never before because of the access that I think we've been able to create.
Who are the people who are the most difficult to convince? For example, in the movie industry, is it the people who are screenwriters, or is it those who do the auditions? Who do you have to convince, and who are the most difficult to convince?
That's a great question, and I think there's a lot of people to convince along the way, and we need to increase disability representation not only in front of the camera, but also behind the camera. We need disabled people writing the stories. We need disabled people in leadership positions so we can start to see the change from bottom down, top up. We need to see the change throughout the organizations. And as we've seen, I think, with women in power, they're more likely to employ more women. And I think we can start to make changes within the employment system if we also start to have disabled people in those powerful positions. And I think what we've been able to do at Sea Talent is really, I think, lead by example. We've got a team that is, the majority of us are disabled, have lived experience, and we understand the challenges that we face. And I think that is also why we've been able to make the change within those companies and convince more people to give disabled talent the opportunities and the chances that we haven't been able to have before.
Are you able to put yourself in the shoes of able people, so-called able people? Perhaps they don't know how to act. Can you tell us how we can approach a situation?
Yeah, so it's a lot of education, it's a lot of learning, and I think oftentimes even first of all understanding that it's the society that we live in and we have to create accessible spaces. I would love to see more events having sign language interpreters, having live captions, starting with visual descriptions, because I believe that those small, they may seem small details, can implement big changes. And whilst accessibility alone cannot solve ableism, it is one crucial step to the elimination of it.
You've already done it. You've described the image for people who couldn't see, and I didn't even think about that before. I'm going to think about it the next time. Thank you very much. Just one more thing. We have TikTok, the YAS TikTok for the summit. And there's a TikToker who said that we don't have to admire. What do you think about saying that we have to admire people who have disabilities?
Yeah, so we represent a lot of disabled talent who are on social media, who are content creators, and I believe that they really have been able to shift the narrative much quicker than we've been able to within Hollywood and within the film industry, because they haven't had to go through so many gatekeepers. They haven't had to experience so many inaccessible systems, although social media platforms still have very ableist algorithms, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done on those platforms. A lot of our talent have been very successful on those platforms, and if we talk about that inspirational narrative that we have been stuck with that has created so much of an issue, it's a fine line. If a disabled person has been genuinely inspirational, then it's not a bad thing to call a disabled person inspirational. But we just have to be cautious of, are we saying that they are just purely inspirational because of them being, going to the grocery store, for instance, or just because they are getting over ableist barriers. And I think oftentimes I have people say to me, you've achieved despite being having a disability. And I say, no, I've achieved despite the ableist society that we live in.
Thank you very much. Ooh, I've lost my little earpiece. Thank you very much.
Vous allez penser que je me répète.
Now, you might think I'm being redundant, but of course, you can leave your comments online for Keely. You can also tell her, you can talk about your own disabilities or obstacles that you've had to face, and you can ask those questions online. Or for those who are here in person, you can prepare your questions, and we'll talk about that later. Our last activist, they are called Samir Jah, and he lives in the USA, and when they were little, they were bullied because they didn't correspond to the mold that people had for him. Whether they were a boy or they're a girl. If you're a boy, then of course you like to fight and you like soccer. This is sort of stereotypes that we have. But we know that they love to fight because they want to protect LGBTQ students.
I've actually heard from some of my old teachers from middle school that have, found my book through one way or another and have been using the tips and tools in it. Every single student deserves a place where they can feel safe and included to learn, and every single school should be that space.
Bonjour Samir.
Hello, Samir. Can you tell us about your life? We saw it in the video, but how did you experience it? Where did you start from, and how was it all?
So I was bullied all throughout elementary and middle school. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is a very liberal place, but even still, I was bullied because I was very feminine. I didn't fit the stereotypes, as you say, of what a boy should be. And because of that, I would try to change myself. I would try to fit in so I wouldn't hear, "You're so gay," in the hallways every day. And it really took moving to a different school that was much more inclusive for me to understand that I could be proud of the word gay, and that the things that made me different weren't wrong or bad. I didn't have to be ashamed of them. And so I decided to start my organization, the Empathy Alliance, at 14 after coming out, because I feel like every child deserves to have a safe and inclusive place to go to school. And I firsthand saw what a huge difference an inclusive school could make in my own life. So that's how I got started with my activism work, and I've kept going ever since.
How old were you when you needed to change your school and you needed to fight for those rights?
So when I was in elementary and in middle school, I didn't even know that the bullying that I was going through was wrong. I didn't even know that it was wrong to be bullied for being feminine. It was wrong to be called gay in a derogatory way because no one stood up for me, none of the teachers, none of the other students. And when I turned 14, I was at a much more inclusive school, and I realized that I was very privileged to find a place where I could be myself and have a supportive family. Thankfully, my parents are so amazing and supportive. And so I decided that I wanted to go back to my old school where I'd been bullied and change it, transform it, train the teachers, train the students, start a club, get books in the libraries, and make sure that no other kid had to go through what I went through at that school. And that was how I got started at 14 years old.
Et toi, t'en as écrit un de
And
livre, pour les
you
profs,
wrote
donner des
a
clés,
book
pour les
for
aider à
teachers
mieux
to
intégrer
help
tout le
them
monde, on va dire, pour
integrate
inclure tout le monde.
everyone.
Il y a beaucoup de profs dans cette salle
There are many
aujourd'hui,
teachers in this room
ici à
today,
l'ONU à Genève. T'aimerais
here
leur dire
at
quoi? Tu peux leur parler
the UN.
directement. Vas-y.
You can speak to them directly. What would you like to tell them? They're forced to listen to you.
Yes. Well, I think for all of the teachers and educators in the room, my biggest message is you have LGBTQ+ students in your classrooms. You work with LGBTQ+ students. The statistic right now is 21% of our generation identifies as LGBTQ+. And so even if your students aren't out to you, even if you might not know it, they exist in your classrooms. And you need to make sure that you're creating a space that is supportive, where they feel like they can talk to you, they feel like they are included, they see themselves represented in the curriculum and in the things you're teaching. Those would have made such a huge difference in my own growing up. If I had had that, I would have understood that the bullying I went through was wrong.
Ton livre aujourd'hui est édité en
Your
anglais. Quand est-ce qu'on va
book
le trouver en
is
français
available in English, but when will we have it in
Comment
French or in other languages?
Yes, so my book, Read This, Save Lives, obviously it is based a lot in my work in the U.S. I worked with a lot of organizations, some of the largest organizations in the United States, to put this book together. But it has sold internationally. Obviously translation would help that a lot, and I really hope that it can be translated very soon. If anyone knows anyone that would love to translate, I would be very grateful.
L'appel est lancé.
Well, he launched a call. I'm sure there are many people who are bilingual and would be interested in helping Samir. Now, you spoke to us about San Francisco. In Europe, we think that in the US, in spite of what happened in recent times, we have the impression that the US is more or less an open country, but you said it wasn't the case. Can you explain to us that?
Yeah, I think that every country, and this is especially important at the UN, every single country can do more to include students, to make classrooms and the entire country safer for LGBTQ plus youth. And it was actually very, surprising to me as well, living in the San Francisco Bay Area, that things were not great for me. I did face a lot of bullying. There is still discrimination. And in the US as a whole, right now, there are hundreds and hundreds of bills being passed just in the last year that are targeting LGBTQ plus youth, that are trying to make it so you're not allowed to talk about LGBTQ plus identities in schools. You're not allowed to read books that have LGBTQ plus characters. They're trying to erase us from existence. So even in places that might seem on the face very supportive, there's a lot that can still be done to make sure these youth are safe, and our community has really high rates of suicide, of depression. LGBTQ plus youth will die because of these policies, because of the lack of support. So it's especially important to make sure we're doing everything we can.
Do you think that things are getting worse? Now, we've made much progress at the beginning of the millennium, but then all of a sudden, things are getting worse. What made it happen this way?
I think with increased visibility, more queer people coming out, more discussions around things like bathrooms and LGBTQ plus education and curricula, more books being published with LGBTQ plus characters. Some people are scared. They think that this means kids are being indoctrinated or taught to be gay or trans, and that's just not true. Statistically, it's proven to be not true. But a lot of people have this fear. And I think a lot of politicians and lawmakers are trying to actually induce this moral panic. They're trying to use LGBTQ plus youth as pawns to gain support, to create an enemy that they can then fight. But that comes at the risk of the lives of these LGBTQ plus young people. And it's really scary to see that.
Now, people who are scared of or who don't like queer people, can you tell them something? Or what would you say if you spoke to them directly?
I think the best way to get that message across really is just for me to share my story, for people to just look me in the eye and, we're human beings, we're all people. Everyone I've talked to, I've been in spaces that are full of people who don't think I should have rights, that my identity doesn't exist, or it's wrong, it's immoral. But when we have a conversation, when we're able to just talk, it can be very difficult and scary, but when we're able to just talk and they're able to understand that I'm a human being, that I just want to, meet friends, I'm currently in college, I just want to, have fun, I don't want to be fighting for my right to exist. I think that helps them humanize me. It helps with empathy. That's why my organization is called the Empathy Alliance.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Round of applause, please. Have you been victims of bullies? You can tell us on the online chat. And I'll just say it again, prepare your questions, because now we're at the end of the presentation, of the introduction of all these young activists, so you can ask your questions soon. Now we're going to move on. Now, you remember that even though there are 6 people on the stage, they're extraordinary people, of course. There are hundreds, even thousands of activists activists around the world. We're going to see their faces on the screen, and they're going to wave to you. You can see them. I would like a round of applause for them because they're with us online.
Leur cause évidemment se rapproche de l'inclusion, des personnes handicapées. Ils veulent aussi protéger les enfants. Ils sont tous en ligne avec nous. Vous allez voir à la fin de la vidéo.
They're online with us. Their causes include inclusion and things we've heard. Maybe there'll be some of young activists in their next summit next year. You can react. Now, all of you are young, you have your life ahead of you. Old people haven't been able to do it before you, and now it's up to you. You need to act. You know that we are counting on you, and we know that you can do it. And now I would like to welcome Nathalie Fontenay, State Councillor in Geneva. She spent the morning with us, so you can give her a round of applause. Thank you.
Madame la Directrice Générale des Nations Unies,
Director General of the Office of the United Nations in Geneva, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of Generation Z, and of course, dear young activists. It is an immense pleasure to be here in this room with you for this Young Activist Summit. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here today and for giving me the opportunity to speak before you just after these presentations that we've just made. The Canton of Geneva is very proud to host these 6 chosen activists and to offer them an award which will allow them, we hope, to continue with their activities and to continue inspiring various new initiatives. You're here in Geneva, at the heart of a major hub for global governments and international cooperation. Geneva is a city with the most organizations dedicated to seeking solutions for a fairer and more sustainable world. You are in the right place. International Geneva needs you. We need new sources of inspiration and commitment, and we need tangible solutions. Dreaming of a better world is an excellent thing, but committing to create a better world is even better. Commitment means being able to choose. It is a moral contract that we make with ourselves. And it's one that we dedicate to others in the spirit of making things change. As a state councillor, the question of commitment to common good is key to my work. Politics means making what is necessary possible. And to do this, we must take action. Commitment is also a question of courage, because to be successful, we must be daring. Considering this, young people are a source of strength and a source of progress. We must give them the resources to act. We must give you the resources to be heard, to act, to awaken consciousness, to fight discrimination, injustice and inequality. And this will allow us to broaden horizons and push the limits of our freedoms. Young people today, and you are a fantastic illustration of this, are not disillusioned or individualists, but you are concerned and critical about what they see and the things that they experience. Just like the older generations, young people experience the oddities and the failures of our societies and its malfunctions and shortfalls. They want to rise to these challenges, but according to the certain modes and technologies that are specific to their generation. In a world grappling with crises and major challenges, you, young people, are a source of hope. Hope that change is possible and that change is necessary. We need commitment, we need creativity and courage from all young people. The world has 1.2 billion young people from 15 to 25 years old. That's around 16% of the global population. But more importantly, That's 100% of our future. Bravo and thank you.
Pour ceux qui ne parlent pas le suisse ou le
For those of you who don't speak Genevan or Switzerland, a state councillor is a bit like a minister. That's a little translation for those who don't have the context. So you've heard, please rise up, take action, become involved, and don't forget to react. Because this is what we need in the world. We need politics to listen to you. You can speak up as loud as you can. We need to hear you. And I'd like to hear your questions now. If you have any questions, it's like in school. Put up your hand. Raise your hand so that we can see who wants to ask the question. Who has a first question? Does anyone have anything in mind? Yes? No? Yes? Unclear. No. Yes, you do. You do have a question. Excellent. We have a question in the first row. Let us just get a mic down. I also have some online questions. What I'm going to try and do is jump between an online question, on-site question, and so on. This will give everyone an opportunity to talk. Yes? A microphone here in the front, please. It's always a little bit chaotic at the start, but don't worry. Question. Yes, I have a question for Sebastian. What do you think of young activists when they destroy works of art or when they barricade motorways in favor of their struggles? I think that there's a lot of chaos around climate activists. We want our planet and our future to be better because we feel under threat. Our lives are at stake, and it's also a question of the future generations' lives. Therefore, I think that there's a lot of anger and a lot of powerlessness. And one way to express this is through protesting, through getting out on the streets, and specific ways is someone who creates a peaceful protest, for example. This is a way. And therefore, I think that the way of being heard is talking directly to politicians and decision makers, as well as encouraging them to make change. Because it's important that young people who are interested in defending the climate become politicians and get involved in politics. This is an important way of changing the planet and the future. But of course, this is a very personal decision. I understand that there are lots and lots of ways of defending the climate, and this is true in all activism.
Merci.
Merci. Thank you. Happy with the answer? Yes, he's happy with the answer. Excellent. I have a question for Samir, which is online. Samir, what advice could you give to non-queer people who are not used to speaking to LGBTQIA plus people, people who perhaps don't know how to behave appropriately and inclusively?
Yeah, I think a lot of my work is simply just educating people on things like language, terms to use, because most people in their hearts, they want to do good. They want to treat other people with kindness. That's what I found everywhere I've gone, no matter if it's a place that on the face seems really hostile or a place that is much more liberal. And I think the biggest thing is to approach it with kindness. It's okay if you mess up. It's okay if you say something that might not be fully correct. But really, if you're approaching it with kindness, then we will receive it with kindness. But there are a lot of ways that you can educate yourself, especially now when things are online and the internet. There are a lot of resources out there for you to better understand the ways that you can support and the language that you should use.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. That was an online question. Any other questions from the room? Yes, here at the front with the red mask.
On vous apporte un micro.
One moment, we'll get you a mic. Here we are. Perfect. Thank you. Can I please speak in Spanish? Yes, absolutely. Thank you. My name is Ruben Escalante. I'm from the organization Global Citizen, and I have a question for all the activists. I believe that all the activists in this room have very strong potential. But the step between being slightly irritated by something and wanting to change something and then actually moving to action. I guess the obstacle here is fear, the fear of what they'll say, the fear of not having the right resources, the fear of going alone, the fear of commitment. And how on earth did you overcome this obstacle of initial fear? What did you do to move from words to action? Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's a question for all of you. Would everyone perhaps like to give a quick statement, a quick answer, talk about how they overcame this obstacle of fear? Pashtana?
Me first.
Okay. Yeah, why not? You're on my right.
I think for me, the most important part was I just didn't want to talk about the fact that my cousin cannot go to school and go to Kabul and talk about it all the time. But I really wanted to do something because, yes, I knew about it. Yes, there was injustice. Yes, there was a lot of other things. But what did I do about it? So for me, the answer was, okay, we have resources online. I'm going to make sure that I take a tablet, download all the stuff, give it to her, make sure I put my energy into it, get her to school, and then we figure out what our next step is. So for me, I think that was the turning point, putting words into action.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Next, Zulaikha.
For me, when I knew I had to do something, I was quite afraid because I was quite young and I didn't know what would happen to me, and I faced arrest threats as well at the age of 13. And for me, the fear motivated me to want to make change happen because I knew that there was something deeply wrong for me to even feel that way and be in that position. And one thing that I knew about South Africa is that South Africa has a great, phenomenal constitution. And I knew that I could use the constitution and start a petition online and use social media as a tool where I could unite with other young people, share my struggles, and put my petition online, where if the petition gathered enough signatures, the policies would change.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Sebastián? But I don't want to just talk about myself, but my organization as well. I think it's a good example to answer this question. It's a huge diversity of people from education, for example, or art in my organization. There are musicians, there are lawyers, there are people from a whole host of different worlds, and people who before had never thought about being activists. It wasn't their plan. However, I think that we all have one thing in common, and it's that we notice that the world of today is not going very well. There are lots of things that we should change, and we are the ones who need to take action because no one else is stepping up to the plate. And therefore, it was from this pressing need that really made us overcome the shame and the fear and take action. It's usually governments who should do that, but in fact, you just give them a nudge, right? That's what I understand. Next, how did you overcome your fear? Well, I overcame my fear because I imagined just how unbalanced the world it would be if half of the children were educated and half weren't. Imagine a world in 5 years' time with thousands and thousands of street kids, and they become adults. When they're 30, 40 years old, they'll be entirely useful, and that's not good for the world. And my organization is a good example, I think, because we had no money to begin. We started with our own pocket money. If I went to school and I was given 2,000 Congolese francs, for example, well, I shared that. On the other, well, I take what I need and then I give the other bit to street kids who don't have money. They did the same thing. For example, my friends and I, we take care of these children with our personal money. Before, there are resources that exist, but it's a question of finding them. Everyone has something to give. You just need to look for it. If we continue to feel afraid, the world isn't going to change, and that's no good. Thank you very much. Keely, what do you think?
I think, for me, I was more fearful of not doing something. I was more fearful of the world that we would be living in if we didn't, as a collective, do something. And I truly believe that we all have an obligation to fight the injustice and oppression that we face in this world. And I think I realized that to make change, we have to change people's minds. But I believe to make systemic change, we have to change people's hearts. And I think I'm grateful for my naivety in my youth because I didn't know what I had ahead of me, quite honestly, and I just kind of jumped in and yes, grateful that youth was on my side and still is, and I don't know what I don't know, but I knew about storytelling and I knew about the entertainment industry, so using what I knew and turning that into something powerful. But yes, I think fear for me was more about not doing something than doing something.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Et toi, Samir?
And Samir?
Ton truc?
For me, I came out at 14 years old, and that was a huge step for me to even just accept myself, come out to my parents and my family and my friends. But after I did that, I heard from some of my friends from my old school where I'd been bullied, who, after I came out, they told me that they themselves identified as LGBTQ+, but they knew that their parents would kick them out of the house if they came out. They knew that they were still getting bullied in school, or if they came out, they would get bullied in school. And I felt so privileged that I found a place where I could be myself. I had a support system, and I think many of us can agree it was that no one else was doing this work. If I didn't do it, no one else would. And these were my friends at stake, right? These were their lives at stake. And I felt like I really had no other choice.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
N'ayez pas, vous avez compris?
So I think the message is clear. They've all said, there's no other option, I've got to go for it. And for people who are a little older, I think it's up to you to support the future generations, to listen to them, and to tell them that they're right. That is extremely important. If we hadn't taken action when we were young, well, we can do it now by supporting young people. I have another online question for Pashtana. What can we do to support education and to promote education for Afghan girls?
I mean, as young people, the first thing you can do is make sure that you use the hashtag Let Afghan Girls Learn, because that has been a campaign for now the past 13 months to ensure schools are open. Apart from that, the most important thing you could do is reach out to your political leaders, reach out to leaders who are ensuring feminist foreign policy or educational policies on international level, and ask them that we pay taxes, our parents paid taxes for the past 2 decades, and it was sent to Afghanistan. What was made out of it? And you're still, the international community still goes, poses with the Taliban, take pictures. So maybe the next time when your representative goes, maybe call them out. I think that's the most important thing, but also share the reality of Afghan women and Afghan girls. Educate yourselves and educate those who could maybe help, but also question people who still pose with the Taliban and smile and think it's a great achievement that we are taking a picture with them.
Merci beaucoup. Madame Fontanet.
Thank you. Fontanet, Ms. Fontanet, you're in charge of finances. Get ready to get lots of emails, I think. So for young Swiss people here in the room, it's Nathalie.Fontanet at something like that. You can send an email directly to her, or you could talk to your federal council directly. Do not wait. Go directly. Let's make things move. Together we can move mountains. Okay. Does anybody else have a question in the room? Please, hands up. Yes, here in the middle with the blue jumper.
Bonjour, oui, ça marche.
Yes, we can hear you.
Non, ça marche pas. Ah, attention.
No, we need to. We'll just get you another microphone. One moment.
Je vous raconte qu'un monsieur est en train de passer derrière.
And now I'm just describing what's happening. There's someone walking behind. They're bringing another microphone. Yes, excellent. Let's see.
Alors, j'ai une question pour ces prévus.
I have a question for ces prévus. Do you expect to host more children in your orphanage?
Oui, j'aimerais bien être appelée maman des 1000 enfants, ça me dérange pas.
Yes, absolutely. I'd be happy to have 1,000 of children. That doesn't bother me at all, but I'd need more space, because right now we just have 2 rooms. We don't have enough space for the children, but if I can acquire more space, then of course I would gladly host more children. As long as we have the funds, yes, absolutely. Can you see how we're still sending the message and the call for funding over time? That's key. Now, we have an online question here. The question is for everyone. The question is how do you take care of yourselves? When you come up against threats or resistance, how do you take care of yourselves and where do you find the strength to continue? Will we start on the left? Because then it's not Pashtana. Samir, what do you do?
For me, the most important thing to do is surround myself with people who I love and who love me and support me unconditionally, who I don't have to think about my human rights with. I don't have to think about whether they value me as a person or all my identities. And I can just be myself, because there are so many times where we go into spaces that are so hostile that people hate us, they don't want us to succeed. You need to find those people in those spaces where you can just be yourself.
Merci.
Thank you. Keely?
Yes, I think community is key, and finding your people who, as Samir mentioned, that you can really feel at home with, and building and creating that support system. And I think for me too, it was about being honest with myself and being honest with the peers around me. And it took me a while to proudly be able to identify as a disabled person, and also recognizing that it's okay to still have a complicated relationship with your mental or physical health and still be proud of being disabled. And that proudness of my identity allowed me to really connect and feel safe within my community.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
C'est prévu.
Next, c'est prévu?
Oui. Alors, comment j'ai fait pour me protéger?
Yes, how do I protect myself and take care of myself? And how do you keep that oomph? Well, something that's important to note is that there's a decision-making process, and you feel like the decisions that are being made involve you and that you're not invited. You need to bring your own chair to the negotiating table. That's very important. When I began to take care of street kids, my parents didn't want that to happen. They said, "You're crazy. The children are dangerous." Society expected me to lose interest after a while. But the other friends I spoke to, I said, "We're going to be like UNICEF, we're going to help people," and they came with me. And I lent into that support. There are always people who have supported me and who I've been able to count on. They have allowed us to keep that fire within us alive. Thank you.
On me dit dans l'oreillette qu'il faut qu'on fasse vite. Donc vous devez
So apparently we need to speed up. I've been told to go a little quicker. So please, very quickly, Sebastian, what do you think? How do you find the energy and how do you protect yourself? I think that, like the others have said, like the other activists have said, that we also need a support group. I also need a support group. Family, friends, people who can take care of me and support me. And I'm very, very happy to be here with Soledad and Camila from school. They don't just support me professionally, but also emotionally.
Merci beaucoup. Et toi?
Thank you. Zulaikha?
For me, I do believe that community plays quite a huge role in supporting you, especially when, as a young activist, you're expected that when you're this person who takes care of people, who takes care of you. I've had the privilege of being able to surround myself around my family members who always motivate me and also keep reminding me to take pauses and breaks and also recharge my own mental health, because especially when I started my activism, I never saw the need for especially mental health and attention to mental health and also receiving medical care for my mental health, and that took a huge toll on me. And when I was experiencing that huge toll, when my mental health fall apart, that made me then see the need to also begin to see psychologists so that I have someone where I can speak in a safe space and actually express myself to openly and freely and feel safe in that space.
Merci de cette honnêteté. Merci.
Thank you very much for your honesty. Pashtana?
Well, for me, I would like to acknowledge that I do go to therapy. I started recently. A lot of people don't talk about it, and there's a lot of stigma, but I do go to therapy, and I think it's the most important part. I had a supportive father, but my relationship with my family is not the most supportive. Or with people sometimes where I work with are not the most supportive. So it's always important to have that space to yourself. It's okay not to always be the loudest. It's okay not to be always on camera or on TV and say be the loudest. It's okay to fight silent battles. You can be yourself, take your time, pause a bit, as Zulaikha said, and just recharge, breathe, because after all, you are a human.
Merci infiniment pour
Thank you so much. A round of applause.
On n'entend vraiment pas souvent ça.
We don't often hear that from young people. You've all done an excellent job. And a lot of people like to give the illusion that they have infinite energy and infinite good vibes. And then, in fact, you're all human. So that's very, very nice. Thank you for your honesty. Please, I would invite you to stand up. We're going to bring out your trophies, and we're going to talk about it. Now, we want to give you this prize because it's important to give you a physical object to remind you that you were here on the 2nd of December in this room in Geneva. And look over here. We're going to call Jad, Heidi, Pinote, Alexia, Alicia Lola, and Lola. They're going to come up on the stage with us. They all have a trophy for you. This is a young generation. It is the younger generation, a generation younger than you, who's thanking you. Thank you for taking care of the future, for creating a more inclusive, united, and fair world. Everyone has chosen the activists that they wanted. It's not random. Here we are. These are your prizes. Thank you.
Ils sont pas grands, hein.
They're not very big, are they? So everyone sit back down, please. Could you stay here for a second longer? Thank you. They're okay. We were speaking to Madame Fontanet about this trophy. It also comes with a bursary, thanks to the Pashtana Durrani Foundation. And I'd just like to know what you're planning on doing with this money. How are you going to use it?
Right now, in the United States and throughout the world, people are trying to erase LGBTQ+ youth. They're trying to say that we don't exist. They're trying to say that we shouldn't be discussed in schools. We shouldn't have books written about us. And that's incredibly scary because so many youth live in places where you don't hear anything about LGBTQ+ identities. You don't hear anything about supporting LGBTQ+ people, and that's exactly how bullying, like what happened to me, was made normal and okay. So I plan to use the grant to donate books, especially in areas where there's no discussion happening on these issues, so that young people, young queer people, can read these books, see themselves represented, and see that there are people who love you and support you and want you to thrive.
Et toi, Kili, tu vas en faire quoi?
What about you, Keely? What are you going to do with your grant?
Thank you. So at Sea Talent, we are still seeing our artists having to get changed in storage rooms or audition in car parks because accessibility is rarely satisfactory. So I plan on building one of the world's first actually accessible film studios, and this money will go towards the development of that film studio so we can create a universally designed space that's designed with disabled people in mind, and we can create new, innovative stories by and with disabled people.
Et toi, c'est prévu.
What about you, c'est prévu?
Alors, puisque je n'ai pas encore suffisamment d'espace pour prendre tout le monde.
I don't have enough space to take everyone on yet. So there are people who are still on the streets. So I want to build a health center that will offer free healthcare to children. Very often, children are sick or injured and they can't go to hospital.
Et toi, Sébastien?
What about you, Sebastian? I'd like to thank Timoteo and everyone who made it possible for me to receive this prize. I'd like to use the grant to empower the work that we do in Latin America so that we can continue protecting the environment and protect those who are fighting for the environment. Because Latin America needs the world and the world needs Latin America. So I hope that our work will ensure that Timoteo and everyone else will have a future. Did you hear that, Timothée? He thanked you specifically. What about you, Zulaikha?
I would firstly like to begin by thanking everyone that's contributed to this prize. It's quite sentimental, especially because on the trophy it's written in my maternal mother tongue, isiNdebele, which in South Africa we still experience a lot of tribalism, so it's not really recognized as it's a minority language. I have a non-profit organization which I founded this year called Dare to Change, which focuses on inspiring the youth to dare to change the world around them. And one thing that I noticed after writing my book is that a lot of children in South Africa cannot read. And this is because in South Africa we're struggling with creating a culture of reading amongst children. And also children don't see people who look like them and have stories written by people who look like them that are representative of their identities. And I decided that I want to use the prize to start an initiative in my organization called Reading to Change the World in order to build library corners for schools in disadvantaged communities which don't have libraries, in order for them to have books so that the children can reach their full capacity and be able to read and have reading material written by African authors with stories of people who look like them and stories of realities they can relate to. Thank you.
Pashtana, what about you?
For me, I think I'd like to brag that I'm a very organized person. So I have divided the next 5 years into a plan where this grant will contribute to the first 34 schools in our 34 provinces. Then we'll be going towards the districts, that in Afghanistan we have 393 districts, and then we will go to the village level. The reason we are doing this in this portion, we are trying to take back our power. The way in the past 2 decades, Taliban came in and took the Afghanistan through villages. I want to take back our power as young girls, as young women, through education in the same villages, in the same districts, and in the same provinces. And that's my goal. So another school.
What's wonderful is that the Cicely Durrani Foundation and everyone else, you can be reassured that they know exactly what they're going to do with that grant money. So your investment will be utilized very well. Before ending, I would like to give the floor to the person who welcomed us into her home, as it were, Tatiana Valovaya, the Director General of the UN office at Geneva. So please, a few words for everyone who's here and for the young activists who are here. Please, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And it's always a real pleasure to have a room full of young people in the Palais des Nations, because that shows that United Nations do have the future. That shows that you, young people, boys and girls, young men and women, you support our activities, you support our work for making the world much a better place for everybody, not to leave anybody behind. Really, to build up together the world of solidarity, of prosperity, inclusion, and equal opportunities for all. But not only you, young boys and girls, came here to learn. Also we, the adults, the older generation, we also came here to learn from you, young activists, to listen to you and to understand how we can work together. You've been telling us absolutely amazing stories of your activism, and I would like to thank all of you. Pashtana, Zulaikha, Sebastian, Seprevu, Kili, Samir, you've been doing an absolutely amazing work. And I have only one wish, that when, hopefully, you'll meet together in 30 or 40 years, maybe you will no longer be young, but you will still be activists. And I really think you have this in your genes. You are passionate, you are kind, and you really want to change the world. And I really hope that this summit would allow you to go on with your activities. We've been keeping track on the work our previous activists have been doing. And we really see that this participation in this summit is not the summit from the point of view of your careers. Sorry. you can go on with delivering great things. And we know that previous activists, they invested their grants, their resources, their time in going on with their activities. For example, last year, activists who came from Peru, as a result of this summit, managed to receive the support of a bank, and now this bank and his organization are providing education for 8,000 young boys and girls in Peru. Or another project which came from the 2020 activists from Uganda. Now there are more and more ecological opportunities, solar panels, ecological stoves in schools in Uganda. And in 2019, we had here as a young activist, Najem, Nobel Prize winner, and she is going on to supporting the project for female victims of violence in her country. So there are lots of stories like that. And I would like to say that I really hope that the participation in today's event is not the summit of your activism. It's just the beginning. And I really count on you to help us to make this world better for everybody, inclusive, and really to deliver on the mandates the citizens all around the world want us to deliver. Thank you once again.
Et bien maintenant, c'est à moi de vous remercier.
And now, I would like to thank everyone who's here today and who has followed us online. One more thing. At 3 p.m., we will have an Instagram direct that will be moderated by a journalist, and will include these 6 activists alongside us. So don't hesitate, join us with Niloufar Hedayat and these 6 activists. Thank you once again. One final thing. Stand up. Act. Act for yourselves, act for us, act for everyone. Thank you.
J'ai oublié de vous dire de repartir. C'est pas grave, vous étiez bien.